If you're good at what you do, if you're in a hole, people would look for you. So they looked for me in the hole because they thought I was good at what I did.
Oluseun didn't simply dream about Nigeria's automotive possibilities. He took definitive action, creating groundbreaking prototypes and inspiring a new generation of engineers and creators. So, how do you strike the balance between that passion, the love for it, the creativity, everything you want to do? I mean, you've gone to all of these places, you're so inspired, you just want to do this thing. How do you strike that balance between your creativity and profitability for your designs and this manufacturing that you're now going into? You're about to build factories, you're about to have investments coming. Those then will matter. How do you strike the balance?
I do have a life outside of my work, but I've made my work my life, right? And it's easy for us because
Yeah.
it's cars. It's easy to love cars.
Love
Oh
cars.
yeah, oh yeah. I don't love clothes, but it's easy to love clothes. I don't love wristwatches, but it's easy to love wristwatches. I'm
Right.
saying these are things that already you have some really nice ones that once you have, you want to show off.
Right.
Cars are an extension of us. They're like our clothes,
Right.
right? They're like a car that has ugly wheels is like a gentleman dressed up with ugly shoes. Yeah. So it's together, right? And something struck me during the 2020 lockdown. In fact, I built the first one majorly during the COVID, whilst there was no work done.
Oh.
I spent a lot of time at the workshop trying to do
Putting things
things here and
together.
there. Then I came across a video of someone illustrating something to youngsters in a class, saying something about the difference between the small things you do in life and the big things you do in life. If you take a big jar and put big stones in it, you probably fill the jar up with 5 or 6 stones, big ones.
Right.
And then if you take smaller stones and put in there, they will find
Right.
their
They will find
way
their way
in
through.
there.
Right.
And then smaller pebbles will also find their way in there. When it seems like it's all full and you carry sand and you pour it in, the sand will still find its way in there.
Right.
And then when it's fully packed and you carry water and you pour it
It will
in,
still find that
water
way.
will find its way in there. If you focus on water alone and pour water in the jar, the moment you put a stone in, it's going to spill. If you focus on sand alone and you fill the jar up, you put a stone on there, it's not going to go in.
Right.
If you put all those other pebbles as well. So what I learned is that focus on the big things in life. I had focused on the small things forever. For me, the small things were the maintenance parts, right? You're doing paint jobs, service, this, that, little things. Looking at profitability in all those areas. Sometimes when you don't do it, you're like, hey, God, how am I going to pay salaries? All those kind of things. But then it occurred to me that if I were to do what is suggested in that video, it means what are the big things in my life that I want to achieve? All right. I'm 46 now. I will be 46 this year, right? And if I didn't start in 2019, which was like 6 years ago, I probably would not be here talking about stuff that we've done.
Right.
Yeah. So I decided to do the big things in life at some point, which was manufacturing. Let me focus on manufacturing. Let me focus on what needs to happen for that to be set up. And then the small things like service, paint jobs, and all that will take care of themselves. Right. At first, that would make profitability suffer until you understand structures in business and having to put people where they need to be so that the business can run without you. Right. So it is very important for me to focus on the thing I'm doing now because it seemed right now to me that I was put on this earth to solve these problems. So if we build vehicles that are eco-friendly, don't consume that much fuel, or consume an alternate renewable energy as fuel, then we are getting somewhere.
You're filling
Right?
the gaps.
We are filling the gaps. We are trying to extend our know-how to the average Nigerian. Imagine that we focused on building cars like Lamborghinis and all that. You are not really going to expect an average guy to bring $500,000 to come and buy a car from us, right? But
Not in this market.
not
Or a handful of them, really.
exactly. If I were to build eco-friendly buses, and I tell the average guys that your transportation from point A to point B that was 1K can now be 500 naira or 350 naira. It makes sense to that person because I've cut down significantly on the cost of transporting themselves and their goods from point A to point B. So we're actually building a bus factory.
Interesting. When you talk about this eco-friendly
Vehicles.
system,
Yeah.
you're not just talking about the cars or the consumption of it. I did hear you say something about the kind of things you want to put within the factory. It's going to have its own farms. It's going to have. So are you saying that in the long run, the system with which you're going to produce these cars will enable you to produce them in a more affordable way, which then increases your profitability? And that way you're merging this passion that you have, the creativity of it, and you're also still finding a way to balance it with earning and making money and making sure that the business is sustainable.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, absolutely. So our focus is not just to build the cars, but to build cars from scratch. The federal government has given an incentive such that if you're building cars from scratch, CKD, completely knocked down vehicles, you have 0% import duties on all your parts.
Oh, okay. That's fantastic. And I
Absolutely.
imagine that also translates
Eventually
into the
profitability.
vehicles.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then because these vehicles are coming in pieces, the floor, the walls, the roof, windscreen, seats, engine, wire, everything separate. Putting them together now makes us teach our own people, transfer that technology to them.
Okay, so you need to clarify something for me here. When you say they're coming in parts, floor, this, that. So the factory you're putting together now, is it still a manufacturing factory or you are
An assembly.
assembling cars?
Good. So, assembly, even I was very critical of this before. Assembly of cars is the way manufacturers manufacture their cars. The components are made by different people. If one company wants to focus on making every single component, right, then it's going to be a huge task. But it's possible. Why I say that is because BYD as a company has shown that that is possible. They are bigger than Tesla, bigger than every other person in terms of sales of their vehicles and in terms of manufacturing those vehicles because they have control over their back end. So
So they manufacture every part.
everything. In fact, they make batteries and modules, electrical systems.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. So what we are doing now is to be commercial. We cannot build cars in a bespoke way. Bespoke.
Okay, yeah,
right?
that makes
Like,
sense.
I'm
Right.
just doing it to your taste.
Because the prototype you're doing now, or all the two that you've done so far have been sport cars.
So we moved from doing sports cars into doing public transportation vehicles. You can go to each of those components manufacturers and buy those components, buy engine, buy gearbox, buy wires, buy tires, buy everything, bring everything to Nigeria, 0%, and then weld, paint, and assemble. Because you're still going to weld. Welding means you're teaching your guys how to weld. Or fabricating, painting means you're teaching them industry standard in terms of how it's done over there. And then assembly, and then testing. Once everything is done, you have to test it for sound, test it for leakages. You have to have showers from all directions to simulate rainfall. Is there any leakage from the windows and all of those things? You have to test those. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is when it has passed through all of this that it can become something that is deemed to be called a commercial vehicle. Yeah, like you can pass it on to a customer at that point. Assembling, but it is also a manufacturing process. right? So all these other manufacturers have test tracks attached to their factories. So if the test track is like 2 kilometers, by the time you go around 100 times, you've done 200 kilometers. So you can test your car to say, in 200 kilometers,
This is
my
what to
brake
expect.
pad did this, or my tire did
Right.
that, or my suspension did this, or
Right.
whatever. And you
Right.
can do that 200 kilometers for 10 days and have 2,000 kilometers instead of going from here to Maiduguri.
So you have spoken a lot about training, training different skills. You have to train the painters to paint properly. How are you approaching that capacity development? Do you intend, or do you already have a system in place where you are training all of these people? Or is it when the factory becomes reality that you would start this process? How do you feed your factory to produce as much as you need at that time? How are you approaching your workforce?
Cool. So the training institute would be fully set up at the time we're building the factory. But right now, we're already doing some training. Like I said, we already have a maintenance shop that still needs artisans and all that. Training for us is very, very key because Porsche has a principle. Regardless of the school that you go to, you have to go through their Porsche Training Institute before you can work in the company. It's kind of like saying that regardless of what you know, this is how we do it here.
Do they train people that don't work with them?
They trained only qualified people. Do you have a degree in whatever aspect you want to get a job in? Are you an electrical guy, mechanical guy, or whatever
Right.
guy?
Okay.
What's your level of whatever? Okay, you say you know it's come through our training institute. Let's put you through some tests. We've seen that you've done very well, but you are not up to standard. Or we see that you've done very well and we like what you do. Welcome to Porsche. We're doing that as well.
That's
Why
fantastic.
the dream, they say if the dream is not big enough,
Why do it?
right?
So what gaps do you see? What skill gaps do you see in Nigeria's automotive industry that you're seeking to fill?
A lot.
And I ask this because there are probably so many people who, we're familiar with mechanics. Manufacturing seems far off from us. So there isn't a lot to look up to. So if someone was listening to this podcast and has been toying with the idea, oh my God, this won't be a bad idea. What are those spaces that there's a gap? And if we could find people and you're ready to train them, there will be opportunities for them here.
In fact, maybe the question should have been, where are there no gaps?
So there are gaps everywhere.
Oh my goodness. If you
Wow.
look at every single artisan and their jobs or job description or activities, it can be done better. If I were to change the windscreen of your car,
Yeah.
this is how the local guys will do it. They are going to pass a wire through the sealant, try to cut through the sealant all around, and then carry it out. In the developed countries, they have suction pumps that are put on the glass. After they've freed it out, you can hold that suction and lift it out. That way, it has a handle. You are not risking breaking it or all those things.
Right.
If you want to reinstall it, you have to first clean out the hardened sealant and then apply a new one. The new one you're applying has to be a certain thickness. Otherwise, by the time you put the windscreen back on, there might be a gap and then there will be leakages during raining or when you're washing the car.
Makes sense.
Right? I'm using that as an example that the application of the sealant itself requires some level of dexterity that is not in our artisans. Our artisans know the job, but they are not careful enough to look at it and do it in such a precise way. I tell my guys...
Is it a tool problem?
No, it's an approach problem. When we're younger in school, you'll be taught to read a ruler perpendicular to it. If you read the measurement this way, they will say it's
You're seeing
error
something
due to
wrong.
parallax because if the thing was pointing to 7 here, by the time I'm
Mm.
looking at it, it might be pointing to something else. So it
Right.
needs to be
Right.
perpendicular to it. Measurements, doing things and not saying, you know what, they won't see it. You know,
Mm.
that's the gap. Panel beaters need to understand that you cannot just go under someone's car that the exhaust is leaking and say, I want to patch it. Then you look at the ground. Oh, there's one wire here. Let me melt it there. That wire you've picked on the ground has impurities, rusts, and stuff in it. By the time you melt them on a clean sheet of metal, you have introduced that impurity there. So if the exhaust is going to cut again, it will cut at that same
Exact
point.
spots.
That's why people were like, but I just fixed it. These guys know what they're doing, they just didn't do it correctly. Same thing with painters. Painters need to understand that even your fingerprint cannot touch the surface before you paint. That's why you have degreasers, something that removes greases.
Oh,
You
'cause
know,
we
you
have
have, yeah, you
oil
have
on our
oil on our
skins.
skins and all that. You know, you can't have water in your airline. You have to have water separators and dryers. Otherwise, if water gets into the paint as you're applying it, it will cause fish eyes and holes that you would have to wait to dry and redo. Mechanics, same thing. You need a mechanic to understand that loosening a bolt and tightening it is not just brain. There's a tool for it. It's called a torque wrench. Most tires are torqued to a certain specification, maybe 110 Newton meters. Once it gets to 110, it makes a click sound. Click, click, you're there. Otherwise, you can use your brain and press it, and it may not be there, or it might go beyond. Then you are risking over tightening. The gap is in every single artisan department, if I can use it that way, in Nigeria.